have new gods now, declared the master of magnetism at the dawn of Krakoa. And the mutants had become gods in the sense that, through the combined efforts of 5 specific mutants, Homo superior had conquered death itself, and in doing so made mutant resurrection possible. Except for those that served on the great ring of Arrako, namely Storm and Magneto, who forsook the krakoan resurrection protocol and embraced the arrakkii way of life. Magneto symbolically destroyed both his and Storm's Cerebro backups in his first meeting on the Great Ring. Now, even though he did this, Magneto is aware and acknowledged that his daughter, Wanda, gave mutant kind a great gift that serves as an alternative to the krakoan resurrection protocol. It's kind of like an Elysian Fields for mutants, or think of it like a mutant iCloud. It's called the waiting room, and every mutant that dies goes there, even mutants that died before their X gene manifested. And this is exactly where we will find the master of magnetism, and this is exactly where Storm must go. But how will she get there without dying? Before we answer that question, how did Magneto end up in the waiting room in the first place? Well, he did die, or rather, he sacrificed himself to protect all of mutant kind and mankind. Back in the Avengers X-Men Eternals mega crossover event, the Eternal Uranos was set loose on Arrako and given 1 hour to destroy it. Magneto would engage the Eternal Death Dealer, resulting in Uranos tearing out Magneto's heart. Magneto was able, though, to manipulate and stabilize the iron in his blood to delay the kiss of death, give himself time to regroup and strike back. And that's exactly what he and Storm did. So now that we're caught up with how Magneto died, what does Storm have to do with his resurrection? Well, Storm has an intense dream about Magneto in which he declares to her, "Aurora, I was wrong." But wrong about what exactly? Storm was thinking the same thing, and that prompted her to seek the aid of the one person she knew could help get her into the waiting room and closer to Magneto, Dr. Adam Brashear, aka the Blue Marvel, who fortunately is working on a way to contribute to the mutants' campaign against Orchis. When Storm arrives at the Defenders HQ, Dr. Brashear is evaluating the Dominion with none other than Taia, the mother of fucking Galactus. Storm is relieved that he's on their side, and Blue Marvel reveals to Storm that Orchis stands for everything he hates, and that non-mutants must work together with mutants to stop the Orchis threat. And Storm replies word for word with what Magneto said to her when he died in her arms. "Or society will destroy us simply for daring to exist." Dr. Brashear is confident he can send Storm to the waiting room via the portal room at Defender's headquarters. But before he can make necessary calibrations and check for safety, Storm leaps into the portal, which sends her to the mutant iCloud known as the waiting room. And check out this imagery. I mean, I said it was a mutant iCloud, and it's covered in clouds. Now, Tarn the Uncaring welcomes Storm as we see some significant symbolism in cosmic abstracts behind him, namely the Living Tribunal, Mistress Death, and to the right of her, the Wheel of Fate. Now, I believe these are paths that mutant souls can choose to take. I did do some research and could only find the meaning of a few of these. Most of my research mainly comes from Marvel Tarot #1, a one-shot book, and starting with the top left is obviously a tower, or rather the tower, which represents disaster, devastation, chaos, crisis, and keep this in mind, revelation. Mistress Death is associated with loss, conclusion, mourning, transformation, and inevitability. And lastly, the Wheel of Fortune, which is synonymous with destiny, not the blue-haired streamer from YouTube, but Irene, as in Mystique's Irene, fate, expansion, and opportunities. I believe this wheel is similar to, or actually is the wheel of Tyrannos the Utgard Thor that we see from Thor, the Immortal Thor, issue number 5. Instead of wielding a giant hammer made of Uru, the primordial god was created to hold fate in his hands and turn the wheel. But enough about that, and back to our story at hand. Storm, like anyone with common sense, asks Tarn where are all of the mutant souls, and Tarn reveals that the signs and symbols serve as ways into the waiting room and out. He then goes on to ask Storm the $1,000,000 question. Who did she come for? Because Tarn knows the only way there is death, and Storm is not dead. Now that's worth mentioning is that Tarn, being in the mutant afterlife, has knowledge that mutant resurrection had come to an end on Earth, with no certainty of the queue ever being resumed, which means he has knowledge of the fall of X and the current status of mutant kind. This is significant because remember, at the top of this video, Magneto proclaimed to Storm in her dream that he was wrong, and his body language was that of defeat and shame. Is it possible, if Tarn knows the fall of mutant kind, does Magneto know it as well? And if he does, this sheds light on the possibility that maybe Magneto was referring to being wrong about believing in Xavier's dream of mutants and humans working together. When Storm reveals to Tarn that she is there for his killer, he is insulted. Talk about opening up old wounds. Because some time ago, reluctantly and for the greater good of Arrako, Magneto formally challenged Tarn for his position on the Great Ring of Arrako, the seat of loss. Magneto used his helmet to immobilize Tarn's psychokinetic abilities and crushed his skull, wiping Tarn from existence like a stain. Tarn reveals to Arraro that they are in the well beyond the worlds, and it is the very seat of magic, and that he always has been a genomic mage, which is basically a fancy term for saying he can psychokinetically manipulate his DNA and the DNA of others. As we see Tarn here transform into this gross exaggeration of himself as he prepares to attack Storm. And like a predator, he plays with his prey, lecturing Storm about how he's going to torture her and what the fate of her soul would be after he consumed her. Storm calls Tarn's bluff and reminds him she has studied enough magic to know that magic is of symbols and signifiers of power. And in the waiting room, they are their own signifiers. Storm declares that Tarn is facing Storm's truest self, her final form, if you will. And speaking of final forms, we see Tarn further evolve and expand and grow into an even more monstrous form than before. And with this, his growth in stature also comes the increase in self-proclamations and ego. He questions Aurora's identity, reducing her to mere substance for his grand design. She quickly reminds him that she is a witch of the weather, named for the storm, and that he was standing on a cloud. And with that, Storm obliterates Tarn's genomic jabroni candy ass with the most electrifying display of lightning in the history of the waiting room. Maybe not. After this, to her surprise, the ancient Egyptian deity of magic, Ashake, emerges before Storm. Ashake seeks to aid Storm in her quest for Magneto. Storm tells the goddess of her dream and a specific detail in that there were 5 helmets at the feet of Magneto. Ashake reveals that 5 is the number of magic, and the 5th sphere is the sphere of judgment, and that no mercy is found there. Ashake later tells Storm that although she doesn't know where all of the mutant souls currently are, she does know the path they took, and most of them took the path of death. This shocks Storm, no pun intended, as she realizes that all of those mutants are gone with no way of return. But Ashake reminds Storm that she returned after being dead for over 1,000 years. The mutant souls already crossed one of the thresholds to get to the waiting room in the first place, and that death is not the barrier many believe it is. Ashake tells Storm that she was allowed to come to the well beyond the worlds for a reason, given that she is still alive. She warns Storm that a great conflict is coming and that Magneto holds the key to fighting the darkness. She then takes Storm to the path Magneto took, the tower. To her surprise, at the magical speed of thought, Storm begins climbing the stairway of the tower as she listens to the final philosophical words of her ancestor. She tells Storm that this is the way that Magneto took in life and in death. And with every rise, so there must be a fall. And fall indeed is what Storm did as the tower began to collapse and Storm fell into another plane or dimension. Storm is now having a conversation with the Dominion or Phalanx, and which basically is like a supreme intelligence and Galactus combined. And according to Adam Brashear, the enemy of eternity. The Dominion exists outside of time and space, but travel far and wide to consume information, dense information that enables it to grow. So they encourage Storm to ask questions. Storm first asks the obvious, where am I? The Dominion explains and replies, the junction to everywhere. Second, she asks if there are others like the Dominion. They explain and reply that the Beyonders, the Ivory Kings, function like them. Now, the one that answers this second question is the Ace of Crowns, if you notice here, aka Enigma. This is the final form of one of the clones of Mr. Sinister. He actually did attain his goal of becoming a Dominion, or at least one of those clones did. He increases odds. Storm can now see the increasing danger because the more knowledge she acquires, the more of a satiating treat she becomes for the Dominion. It's like fattening up a pig. She takes a risk and asks a third and final question. Where is Magneto? Now this panel right here is significant because look at the orientation of Storm's legs and the position of Magneto's body as the Dominion are describing him. And the Dominion mentioned that he was not consumable, so they just passed him on. But his right leg is straight, arms behind his back, and left leg crossed behind the right. Now why is that important? This is exactly like the first tarot card, the Hanged Man. This is important because the Hanged Man represents sacrifice, surrender, acceptance, patience, and contemplation. Remember, Magneto sacrificed himself for, in his words, a world that hates and fears us. And he accepted that fact. And while he's been in the waiting room, he's had much time to contemplate, which would explain how he realized he was wrong about something and now holds the key to the mutants' victory. This is huge. And speaking of huge, the Dominion is finally ready to consume Storm, but she gives them something more exciting to chew on, an Omega level lightning blast. And with this, Storm begins to fall again. This is the time now she lands right where we found Magneto at the beginning of this story, facing the river near the broken city. And Storm, like Magneto, is in judgment. And notice at her feet there are 5 of the helms that she used to wear to hold her hair in place. And Storm has a feeling that this place will judge her worse than it did Magneto. And there you have it, folks. What a journey. Now, looking at this image of Magneto on the River of Judgment here and those names on the wall like a memorial, I believe there are names. These are the names of tens of thousands of non-hero mutants. Because remember, on Krakoa, there were like thousands of mutants that were there. But these are kind of mutants that are like synonymous to people, if you will. They have the X gene. It's a genetic mutation, but they're not in the comics or the movies or anything like that. And basically, these are the people, I believe, that Xavier telepathically coerced to walk through various Krakoan gates to their demise at the Hellfire Gala, which was the official fall of X. Now, Xavier didn't know he was doing this. He didn't know that he was sending his mutants, his children, to slaughter at the time, because he was doing so because Orchis threatened to eliminate a multitude of humans if Xavier didn't comply. I believe Magneto is being judged now for not being there to protect these mutants. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below, and make sure to like and subscribe for more Trademark Comics.